Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'm Bhavesh from SwiftEnterprise Product Management team, and today we'll be taking you through all the updates that are part of the 5.5 version. We would like to assure you that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all those who have registered for the session. We would also like to hear from you, so please type in your questions and feedback in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen anytime during the webinar, and we will take up the questions at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get started. So the agenda for today's session would be, we'll first look at the upgraded burndown chart. We will get into why we are calling it as the upgraded burndown chart, and the key capability that you will get as part of this upgrade burndown chart would be the ability to look at the scope changes that have happened during the sprint duration. And along with that, how the scope freeze date plays an important role while you are tracking your progress on the burndown chart. On the Agile Analytics front, we will then look at the test pyramid for visualizing your test suite and how it is going to help you maintain the right balance of test units. And we will also look at Swiftly, wherein we can view different kinds of lean analytics and also see how they can be interpreted into more actionable insights. Along with these, we have made a couple of new features as well, wherein we have brought in the new bug eForm and the releases and sprints view. And at the end, we will also look at the mobile app dashboard updates. So with that as the agenda, let's get started. So first up, we'll look at the upgraded burndown chart. So typically when we are looking at the burn down chart, what we get to see is the rate at which the team has been burning remaining effort for the work items for that sprint. And often there could be a spike or a dip as the team continues to work throughout the sprint duration. While the spike and the dip are reasons for some unforeseen work, it could also be because the scope of the sprint has been changed by addition or removal of some work items. Now, in order to remove that ambiguity and to ensure that the team is in line with why the change of remainder effort has gone up or down suddenly, we have brought in the ability to view the work item count or the sprint scope along with the burn down chart. So in this case, as we are looking at the burn down chart, we are looking at the burn down chart, and we can see that there is a clear spike on 26th of March here. The remainder effort has gone from 156 to 186. Now, as I said, it could be because the team found something that they felt is going to take longer than they originally had planned for, and it could be one of those reasons. But to remove that ambiguity, whether this has happened because of a scope change brought in to the sprint, what has been given is the ability to view the work item count as the secondary axis. So in your settings for your burn down chart, you can select display analytics and work item count and save that. What you will see is there is a clear change of scope that has happened. So up until 22nd and 25th of March, I had 35 items in tagged to the sprint, and the next day there were 40 items tagged to the sprint. So you are able to make that correlation of the spike very easily because you are able to see the work item count. In a similar way, you would be able to see a dip in the scope if work items have been removed. Now, while this is the visualization that you would look at, there is another way of looking at the scope change when you are using the bar chart representation. So let's assume that we are not looking at the work item count in secondary axis and simply looking at the remaining effort on a day-by-day basis using the bar chart representation. And in this case, with the help of the bar chart visualization, what we are able to indicate is that when the scope got added, we are seeing that as a green bar on top of the remaining work that was originally planned for that day. So clearly there's a distinction between the planned work and the new work that got added as part of the burn down chart. Now here you are able to see 40 hours of effort got added in total remaining effort for that sprint. And in fact, you can also drill down to look at which are the items which contributed to that 40 hours. So I see that the sprint scope got added because 5 bugs got pushed into the sprint scope, probably because the priority of these bugs was very high and the team was expected to get this done as part of the sprint scope itself. Obviously, when these kind of scope changes happen, the team has to figure out whether this kind of changes will affect the ongoing work, and will it also compromise the quality of any of the ongoing work. So it is the team's decision to ensure that whatever new work that has been brought to their attention, that is taken up only if it is not jeopardizing any of the existing work. And if possible, the team would also like to trade some of the low priority items which are still tagged to the sprint, get untagged. So in case you are also removing effort or removing work items from the sprint scope, what you would see is a red bar below the zero axis. So just like you are seeing the green bar on top of the remaining effort, you would see a red bar whenever work items are being removed during the sprint duration. So that's how easy it is to now look at the scope changes for your sprints on the burn down chart itself. Now, as I said, this is the upgraded version of the burn down chart. And since we are ensuring that the scope changes are apparent on all the days of the sprint, what would start happening now is every time you tag a work item to the sprint, it will get factored in as new work for that sprint. Whereas whenever you're removing it, it will be apparent that scope has been reduced for that sprint. So this calculation will happen on a daily basis, which wasn't the case earlier, wherein when you added a work item to the sprint scope, you the bump wasn't apparent on the day on which the work items were tagged to that sprint. In fact, the overall remaining effort for the sprint would increase by that much. And that's why the change of remaining effort wasn't apparent. So this ensures that you are getting a very accurate representation of what was the remaining effort for each of these days while the sprint progresses. Now, in order to ensure that these planning activities which requires the team to tag or maybe untag some of the work items to the sprint are factored in as scope changes. So in order to avoid that kind of misinterpretation, what we have done is we have introduced a field called scope free state for the burn down chart. So what would happen now is along with the sprint start date and end date, you will also have the option to provide the scope free state for the sprint. So in this case, I have ensured that the second day of the sprint is the scope free state, and all the sprint planning happens before or on 14th of March. What this ensures is that whatever has been decided as the scope at the end of 14th of March, that will become my starting point for the ideal burn down. So all the calculations for the projected spillover and the improvement the team needs to do in order to avoid the spillover, all that calculation happens right from the day the scope has been frozen. So that also ensures that you are getting a very high accuracy in terms of when the projected spillover will be shown to the team whenever a new work is getting added. So that's how the burn down chart has been improved. So just to quickly summarize, what we looked at is how you can keep the sprint scope in sight always. So we understand business priorities do change and you need to factor in certain changes time and again. So if you are having these kind of changes happening, it would be a good idea to have the sprint scope set as your secondary axis of the burn down chart always. If you are wanting to stick to the bar chart representation, you would get a clear classification of what amount of work got added or removed whenever you're looking at the burn down chart. Along with that, how you can specify the scope freeze date for the sprint. And once you have done that, all the scope changes are considered only from that day onwards. And so you can sprint planning activity as part of the sprint duration itself, so that all the effort that the team is putting into that sprint is getting counted for that sprint itself. So moving on, section of new agile analytics. So first up, we would like to look at the test pyramid. So before we get into what the test pyramid is shown like in our application, uh, I'd like to set some context on what exactly is the test pyramid. So this is a concept that was brought in by Mike Cohen. He's the co-founder of Scrum Alliance, and in one of his books called Succeeding with Agile, what he has mentioned is you should have a hierarchy of test units, so that every time you are running your test automation, the larger the number of unit tests you have in your testing suite, the better it would be in terms of the time taken for feedback, as well as the accuracy of the results given to the developer again and again. So your base of the test pyramid should always be broader, with unit tests, and the next layer should be the service test, and finally the user interface test. So that's typically the way you should have your test units sized in your test automation suite, so that you have a good strategy towards working on the agile path. So this is the representation which he brought in as part of his book. Here, what you are looking at are the test units categorized by the test type. So I have a huge chunk of unit tests, followed by a lesser number of service tests, and finally UI tests. Now, this typically is a very general representation of your test units, and you may not follow this because of the simplicity and the level of detail that it is providing is not as much as you would like to have. So typically you would want to categorize the test units based on the automation tool being used for each of these layers. So you can also do that by based on automation tools. So as we have done here, I've categorized all the test units in my project, and based on the automation tool which typically get used for these three layers. So your JUnit and Mocha tools are getting used for your unit testing. Rest Assured, JMeter, and Sophia are getting used for your service layer, and Selenium is going to get used for your user interface testing. So that's where you will get a full understanding of how your test automation suite is sized in terms of the number of test units you have. So typically you should have a pyramid, perfect pyramid as you are looking at here. But there could be times when one of the layers has more amount of test units than the previous layer. And in those cases, we are highlighting that with this shape, so that it's apparent that you still need to work towards reducing the number of test units you have for that layer, and keep it lower than the previous layer at the bottom. And in cases where you have just started your test automation journey, where before that you had a lot of automation happening on the user interface front, but very little at the JUnit or service layer, you will see a inverted test pyramid. Now that's something that you would want to avoid at all costs, and that's why you are shown a inverted pyramid. So to quickly summarize what we looked at in the test pyramid is, we saw that a typical test pyramid is categorized in unit tests, service tests, and UI tests, whereas you can go ahead and refine this categorization further based on the automation tool that you're using for these three layers. So you will be able to visualize your test units in the test pyramid as well. So moving on to the next Agile Analytics, which is Swiftly. So as part of this release, what we have done is, for your Agile projects, you will get to see a new menu option called Lean Analytics, wherein you get access to a whole lot of analytics that which are actionable and insightful from the Lean Analytics perspective. So this is generally dependent upon the movement of the cards you have on your execution board. So when you're moving your work items from one column to another or one queue to another on your execution board, your cards are getting updated with a whole lot of information that can be used for this analysis. So Swiftly is one of our products where you can do a lot of visualization of all that data in terms of Lean Analytics. So what you get to see here is a quick introduction about Swiftly, and on the right hand side you will also get to see a way to filter on the data that you need to bring in for analysis. So you could select the work item types that you would want to analyze, the releases for which the cards need to be taken up for analysis, and finally the lane from which the movement log needs to be exported. So once you have made these selections, you can click on export, and what you would get is a file somewhat like this, wherein it has a whole lot of information about the data of the cards and the movements. One of the changes that we are suggesting you to do is, so that you get a higher accuracy of lean analytics that are getting shown in Swiftly, is to categorize the queues further. So generally your ready would be the ready lane, and if in case you have any done lanes as part of your value stream in between, you would categorize them as waiting. And similarly at the end you would classify the final column as done. So this way the waiting time ready column and this closure column are specified as part of your data set itself, so that when you import this data into Swiftly, you would get all that information as part of it. So once I've logged in into my Swiftly account, you can click on the import file. So as part of Swiftly, what you get to see is a whole lot of analytics. But before I get into the analytics and give you an overview of what all is there, one of the filters that is available right up front in a very visual manner is you can decide to change the range of the data that you are analyzing as part of the analytics. So very quickly, I can change the range here as part of the temporal range filter. I can also change based on all the attributes that were present as part of the cards. So I have a whole lot of modules that are tagged as part of the user stories, releases, sprints, card owners, overall status, and finally the value stream that needs to be considered for the analytics. So I can decide to look at the analytics for a specific number of columns, or I can select the entire value stream itself. So all that is possible as part of the filtering capability. Now, just to give you an overview of what Swiftly has, it has analytics in terms of demand, capacity, the cycle time, flow efficiency, and as you are looking at the cumulative flow diagram. Increasing volume of data for the bottom region is indicating that cards are getting closed at a steady rate as you move towards the end of the release. And we are also seeing that the number of stories that are getting tagged to the releases have spiked in between and somewhere in February, because I've selected a couple of releases here. So when we started with the new release in February, you are seeing a spike in all the user stories that got tagged to that release. Also on top, you get a demand-based distribution, how much time the cards have spent in terms of weeks. So clearly, a lot of cards have spent time in different time units here. So you are getting to see that cards got added as part of the capacity on a steady basis, and they also got closed. So a whole lot of cards are getting closed in 1 week. 88 cards are getting closed in the first week, or 55 cards are getting closed in 2 weeks duration. So these are the kind of analytics that you will get as part of the cumulative flow diagram, the demands, the capacity, and cycle time flow efficiency. So this definitely is a whole lot of information that one could start using if you are wanting to follow a more lean execution way of executing your agile projects. So as I said, this is something which is part of the Swiftly product, which is a separate product altogether. So you can get in touch with our sales and support team if you would like to explore this further. What we have done as part of this release is you are able to extract data for analysis, refine it for better analysis, as we saw by classifying the queues and ready, in progress, and done manner, and also get finally the actionable insights in terms of the demand, capacity, flow efficiency. So all of this is part of the lean analytics that you can get from your agile projects. So moving on to the new features in agile projects. So what we have done as part of this release is we have replaced the old planning board, and you will now start seeing the backlog refinement board. Now backlog refinement board helps you groom your backlog as well as plan for your upcoming sprints. But once you have planned for the sprints, and if you would like to see all the work items that you are getting executed as part of those sprints and releases, this is a consolidated view for you to see that. So here you get to select the releases and sprints for which you want to view the data, as well as you can select the item types for see all the work items that have been tagged to the sprint, where the card owners, what were the estimated points, estimated effort, actual effort, remaining effort for all these work items, and at the same time get some information about the sprint as well. So as part of this, what you would get to see is what were the estimated points, completed points so far, what is the percentage of completion for that sprint, how many points were planned at the start of the sprint, how many got increased during the sprint. Similarly, a breakdown of how many work items were planned and how many work items got added. And finally, the team size based on the number of team members that you have for that sprint. So that's a complete visualization that you get as part of the releases and sprints view. You are able to look at all the work items that got executed as part of the sprint, and also get key insights about the sprint in terms of how it got executed. So as I added, the backlog refinement board is the new visualization given in place of the planning board. And along with this, we have introduced the releases and sprints view. Another update that we have done for the Agile projects is use a new bug eForm for Agile projects. So up until now, we had a defect eForm that helped you track all your defects, but it had a traditional workflow which typically doesn't get used for your Agile projects, because you would want to plan it as part of your sprints, execute them on the execution board across the value stream, and all that was not possible with the defects eForm. So in alternative to that, you can now start using the bug eForm, and you can plan it for your sprints and releases by assigning them for capacity, as well as executing them through the value stream on the execution board. So this of course would be our default defect related functionality updates that you would get in the future as well. Moving on to the mobile app dashboards. So let me just log into my mobile app. So what I'm doing now is I'm getting into my dashboard on mobile app. So any of your item status widgets, what you can do here is you can start drilling down on the totals here. So for instance, I can drill down on the location wise epic that I have, and the 10 large user stories that I took up as part of that. So I'm able to see the listing here, and I'm also able to tap on it further and look at the details of the user story. Similarly, for my ECR based pivot widgets, what I can do now is I can drill down to the next levels. So I'm able to drill down, let's say, for my release to the respective sprints and the size wise distribution that I have for the user stories. And I can also change the view to pivot base, wherein I get to see the hierarchy without doing a drill down. So we looked at how the drill down now works from the mobile app dashboard. So this is specifically for our item-based widgets like item status and pivot-based widgets. And we also looked at the way you can change your view for the ECR-based widgets where you can drill down to the next levels, or you can decide to go through the hierarchy that you have built for your widget. And other enhancements that we have done as part of that release, you will now be able to filter the cards on the execution board using to-do owner. So up until now, you just had the ability to filter based on card owners, but often there were times when you had to-do owners for other activities that the card owner might not be performing. So this helps you get all the cards that the uh, resource is going to be working on through his to-dos on the cards. And also we have introduced the back button on the execution board when you navigate from the sprint planning view. So that's all we had for the session today. I'll now open up for the questions. If you have any questions, please type in the questions in the Q&A box on the right hand side of your screen, and we'll be able to take those up. Okay, so seems like we don't have any questions for the webinar today. What we will be doing is we'll send the webinar recording to all those who have attended or registered for this session. We'll encourage you to try out our new features and share feedback on those via email. You can reach out to your support teams as well if you would like to clarify on any of the functionalities that we demonstrated today. And we hope that you'll enjoy using them as part of your Agile transformation journey. So that's all we had for the session today. Thank you.